Hey everybody, Tim here with today's episode of Star Trek Voyager Season 1, Episode 6, Eye of the Needle. This was a great episode. This was a really well done episode, and I love how early in this episode is, because I remember this one very, very clearly, very vividly, and I did not remember that it was so early on. We're only 6 episodes into the series, and boom, we have already made contact with the Alpha Quadrant. I thought it was a long time. It's not until Season 4 till we actually get to the Barclay episodes and stuff like that. But I loved how early on this episode is. So, this episode is about them encountering a wormhole that ends up being basically, I think they said it's 12 centimeters. So it's not very big. And they're trying to figure out a way to see where it goes, and sure enough, it does lead to the Alpha Quadrant, but the probe that they send into it ends up getting stuck, and so they can't really go any further. And so they do make contact with somebody on the other side, and it ends up being a Romulan. And so the Romulan's kind of talking to us, going back and forth. They're trying to figure out a way, hey, can we send messages? And the Romulan's like, nope, you're a spy. You're in the Alpha Quadrant, and you're doing this on purpose. I'm not going to help you. And he actually shuts off communication for a while before they, finally talk him into turning it back on. In the meantime, we learn a lot about different stuff. We learn that B'Elanna had a human father and a Klingon mother, and we start questioning whether or not the Doctor is actually a living being, which is something The Next Generation dealt with a lot, about, especially with Data, obviously, but even with other holograms, Moriarty comes to mind, with sentient holograms. So, and a lot of these questions kind of go on in the background. So finally, they figure out a way to have the Romulan end up beaming to Voyager. And as soon as he gets on board, Tuvok is like, stop, we got a problem. And he realizes that the reason they're having so much communication difficulty is it's actually going through a temporal flux, which kind of frustrated me at first, I won't lie, because we're 6 episodes in, and this is the 3rd time travel type episode that we've dealt with. So already, I'm starting to get a little bit burnt out on time travel. But it turns out that this Romulan is actually 20 years in the past, which is roughly about 10 years before the Next Generation takes place. So way back there, we're still really at odds with the Romulans. So, but they still give him the messages, and they're like, could you please give this to our family? And then he goes back on his way, and then Tuvok is like, oh, by the way, I did some research on him, and he died 4 years ago. And it's why couldn't you have mentioned that? I know they're not supposed to change history and all of that, Back to the Future paradox stuff, but you could have at least, told him, hey, just, I'm not going to tell you how, but you're going to die before we leave. Make sure somebody takes care of this. And it's kind of assumed later on when we do start getting into contact with the Alpha Quadrant that he doesn't. He doesn't actually get those messages to where they need to go. But overall, I thought this was a great episode about finally talking to the Alpha Quadrant and then having those hopes dashed away. And like I said, with all of the ethical questions on, is the Doctor actually a living being? Is he worth talking to, or is he just the equivalent of a tricorder? Is he just a piece of machinery? And he even says, hey, after you all go back to the Alpha Quadrant and leave Voyager here, will you please make sure to turn off my program so I'm just not sitting here by myself for X amount of years? Which is kind of heartbreaking. So for those who have seen this one, what did you guys think? Like I said, I love this episode. So far, we're 6 episodes into the first season, and I like more than I dislike. So I think we're off to a great start. So what did you think about the wormhole? What did you think about the Doctor's ethical questions? And what did you think about the whole time travel part? So go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for subscribing and watching and all of that. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time for Ex Post Facto.